Why did the military bury her name in sealed files? Why did the most lethal sniper America ever trained end up forgotten in the cold silence of the Colorado Rockies? The answers began long before the betrayal, long before the whispers of dishonor that followed her out the gates of Fort Bragg. It began in the desert in 1989, when a single shot broke the silence of a storm. The bullet cut through a mile of sand and wind, defying every law of probability. A high-value target fell, one the best Delta Force teams had declared untouchable. And from that impossible distance, a woman's hand had pulled the trigger. Her name was Catherine Morgan, Kate. To the brass, she was Deadshot Morgan. To her brothers in arms, she was the one you wanted watching over you when the night got too quiet. 317 confirmed kills, 15 years of service, a precision weapon honed to perfection. And yet, when the politics demanded a scapegoat, it was her they cast into the shadows. No medals, no flag folded in thanks. Just silence. And the silence, more than anything, cut her deeper than the bullet wounds she still carried. 6 months had passed since they erased her. 6 months since Checkpoint Alpha, the day she saved a convoy, saved lives, but cost the military its fragile diplomacy. She had seen the ambush before it began, read the land like a book only she could interpret. 7 shots, 7 lives taken before the first hostile could even squeeze a trigger. And yet one of them had been connected. A nephew of a man the diplomats wanted at their table. Her choice had been simple: act or let Americans die. She chose life for her people, but the higher command chose politics, and Catherine Morgan became a cautionary tale. Now, in the frozen quiet of the Rockies, her world had shrunk to a cabin, a rifle and memories that refused to fade. The wood of her porch creaked beneath her boots as she stepped into the thin mountain air. 45 years old, her face carried the story of years written in wind and dust, crow's feet carved from staring through scopes, silver strands in her dark hair that spoke of nights too long and betrayals too sharp. Inside, her rifle waited on a cedar table, a Macmillan TAC-338 laid out in perfect disassembly, each piece gleaming like a relic from a lost faith. For her, maintenance wasn't habit, it was ritual. It was the one part of her life no one had taken. Each morning, each movement deliberate. The bolt assembly polished. The barrel checked. The scope adjusted down to the whisper of a degree. It wasn't just a weapon. It was the last part of herself that still obeyed. And in the stillness, a voice always echoed in her mind, the last words from Colonel Harris when he forced her resignation. Your actions were tactically justified, but politically catastrophic. Resign quietly, Morgan, or face court-martial. His eyes hadn't met hers when he said it. That was the detail she could never forget. Men who'd trusted her in the field, who'd lived because of her trigger, couldn't look her in the eyes when it came time to cast her out. She told herself she didn't care anymore. But the truth, she carried the sting every single day. The radio on her shelf crackled. Not the kind for weather reports or music. This was military grade, salvaged years ago, tuned to frequencies she wasn't supposed to have. A lifeline to the world that had abandoned her. At first just static, then a transmission cut through. Mountain Fortress, this is Convoy Delta 6, proceeding with diplomatic package via Route Canyon. ETA checkpoint 1100 hours. Kate froze. Route Canyon. She knew that road, a death trap with ridges that offered perfect overwatch for ambush. Predictable, repeated. She whispered under her breath, amateurs. The storm forecast was clear in her mind. Snow, heavy and fast, moving in from the northwest. The convoy was heading straight into it, blind, predictable, complacent. And with that storm, they wouldn't have air support when things went wrong. Her stomach tightened. She'd seen this play before. 6 months ago, another convoy, another ambush, another chance to act, and another punishment when she did. She closed her eyes, remembering Checkpoint Alpha with merciless clarity. the faint glint of metal on a ridge, the way rocks shifted when men crawled into position, the quiet stillness that screamed of violence waiting to erupt. She had seen it before anyone else, and she had fired before permission came down the chain, saved them all. And yet the price had been exile. Her breath caught as the memory came sharper. That last target, the one disguised as a civilian, the one carrying the IED trigger under his loose shirt. Had she hesitated, they all would have died. But afterward, that detail didn't matter. He was someone's nephew, someone important, and Kate was someone expendable. Her fists clenched on the wooden sill as the radio continued. Convoy Delta 6 package secure, proceeding as planned. Proceeding blind, she thought, proceeding straight into the wolves' teeth. The satellite phone rang, a shrill, cutting tone. Only one man ever called her on that line. "William," she said, answering, her voice softening. "Thought you forgot me." Colonel Bill Harrison's gravelly chuckle warmed the line. 72, bones creaking, but his loyalty had never broken. Once her father's handler in the CIA, now the last thread of family she had. "Not likely, kid. Some of us still remember loyalty." Their banter faded quickly into something heavier. Bill's voice dropped. "I've been looking into Alpha. Doesn't add up. The timing, the ambush, feels manufactured, like someone wanted that convoy hit or wanted you to act." The words clawed at her gut. She had suspected, but to hear it confirmed, it was like a storm breaking all over again. "There's more," Bill added. "Picked up chatter about a high-value transport through your area, special cargo, high security, except the route isn't as secure as they think." "What kind of cargo?" "Unknown, but the chatter," he paused, "the kind of attention that gets people killed." Kate turned to the snow outside her window. Silent, endless, indifferent. Something deep in her instincts was stirring, a whisper from years of experience. History was repeating. And if history repeated, another convoy would burn, another ambush would strike. And she knew herself too well. She couldn't sit by and listen to it happen. Not again. Not when she still had her rifle. Bill's voice softened. "Watch yourself, Kate. Keep that rifle close. You're not done yet." The line went dead. She stared at the receiver for a long moment, her pulse steady, her breath deep. She had sworn never to go back, never to let them use her again. But maybe this wasn't about them anymore. Maybe it was about her. Her redemption. The snow began falling as she stepped onto the ridge hours later, scope pressed to her eye. The convoy was moving below, engines humming, blind to the eyes watching them. She could already see the shapes tucked into rocks, the faint shadows of men in white camouflage. 20 hostiles at least, heavy weapons, RPGs, perfect fields of fire. It was a textbook ambush, and in another minute the canyon would erupt. Her breathing slowed. The world narrowed to her scope. She whispered to the rifle, the same way she had every day for 6 months. "Let's speak again." The TAC-338 roared, a thunderclap against the storm. And for the first time since Checkpoint Alpha, Catherine Morgan was back in the fight. Why didn't they listen? Why did every convoy commander think they were untouchable until the mountains proved them wrong? The question pulsed in Kate Morgan's mind as the echo of her rifle rolled down the canyon walls. Her first shot had cut through the storm like a lightning strike. A commander's body dropped, and with it, the enemy's coordination stuttered. For 5 precious seconds, confusion reigned, and in 5 seconds she could save lives. Her scope slid to the PKM gunner, the one weapon that could tear through the convoy in seconds. Breath controlled, trigger feathered. Another shot snapped through the snow, and the heavy weapon fell silent. The convoy jolted awake. Vehicles swerved, trying to take defensive positions. Engines revved, steel scraped against rock. Men shouted orders into radios already heavy with static. Kate pressed her radio. "Delta 6, Overwatch Bravo, 20 hostiles. Multiple heavy weapons, coordinates incoming. Move now if you want to live. Static answered her first call. Then a voice, strained, distrustful, unidentified station. Identify yourself. Immediately. She almost laughed, bitter, sharp. Who had time for protocol when lives hung by a thread? She didn't answer. Instead, her scope found the RPG gunner crawling into position. One more breath. One more shot. Another enemy folded into the snow. The convoy commander barked through the frequency again, this time less sure. We copy fire support, adjusting formation. She didn't have to be thanked, not anymore. She just had to keep pulling the trigger. But she knew what was coming. These weren't amateurs. Their formations were too clean, their weapons too precise. The chatter she intercepted earlier still gnawed at her. Russian accents, Spetsnaz terminology. And if she could see their setup, they could see her muzzle flash. A counter-sniper team would already be moving. Her fingers danced across the cold metal of her signal rig. She pulled in another fragment from the airwaves. Sniper on the West Ridge. American by the sound. Neutralize priority 1. They knew her. Not just that she was there, but who she was. The chill that ran through her veins had nothing to do with the storm. Whoever ran this op had studied her, remembered her, waited for her. And yet her rifle didn't waver. She tracked another hostile lining up on the convoy's rear. One more squeeze, and another life ended before it could take others. But already she felt the tightening, the walls closing in. Through the storm, another voice broke in on the radio, different frequency, confident, sharp. All stations, this is Ranger Team Alpha, Eastern approach, ETA 10 minutes, request sitrep. Kate's throat caught, reinforcements, real ones, but 10 minutes in a kill zone was a lifetime. She pressed the transmit key. Ranger Alpha, this is Overwatch Bravo, 20+ hostiles, Russian trained, coordinated ambush. They're breaching the convoy's lead. The pause that followed was heavy, suspicious. Then came a reply she didn't expect. Overwatch Bravo, identify yourself, secure frequency. Kate closed her eyes. She knew the weight of the decision she was about to make. To reveal her name was to step out of the shadows, to let the world remember her not as a legend, but as the disgraced sniper who'd been cast aside. Her voice was steady when she spoke. Ranger Alpha, this is former Master Sergeant Catherine Morgan, Deadshot, providing fire support. Silence, long enough to feel like a verdict, then a man's voice low with disbelief. Morgan, the Morgan from Afghanistan. She didn't answer, the rifle did. Another shot cracked, another hostile fell. Convoy's pinned, she said flatly. I'll keep them alive, you get here fast. Captain Callahan, leading the Ranger team, adjusted instantly. His tone hardened. Whatever he thought of her name, he wasn't about to waste a sniper who could kill like that. Understood, Deadshot. Hold them. The storm swallowed her again. Snow fell in thick, blinding sheets. Her scope fogged at the edges, her breath crystallizing before her lips. She shifted positions, dragging her rifle through the powder, knowing every second bought for the convoy was one she lost to the counter-snipers closing in. And yet she couldn't stop, couldn't pull away. Not when the sound of gunfire below pulled at her chest the same way it had in Afghanistan 6 months before. The same chaos, the same helplessness waiting if she didn't act. Her past had ruined her life, but her past had also made her. She breathed out, long and slow, and lined up again. The TAC-338 cracked. And the storm answered. Callahan's Rangers moved fast, cutting through the snow like white ghosts. The captain's jaw was clenched tight beneath his balaclava, his men scanning ridges for threats they could barely see. One of them muttered, Deadshot Morgan, she's supposed to be gone. Focus on the mission, Callahan snapped. She's keeping them alive, that's all that matters. But in his gut, Callahan knew this was bigger. If Morgan was here, if her name was still whispered among enemies, then this ambush wasn't chance. It was theater, Someone had drawn her into the open. And as another distant crack echoed across the canyon, Callahan's instincts whispered a truth he didn't want to face. This battle wasn't just about the convoy, it was about her. On the ridge, Kate adjusted again, sliding behind new cover. Her heart was steady, her breathing even, but in the back of her mind the truth clawed louder with each shot she fired. This wasn't about the convoy, this was personal. And whoever had orchestrated it, they hadn't forgotten her. How close could death crawl before you felt it? Kate knew the answer better than anyone. She could sense it now in the shifting rhythm of the storm, in the faint pull at the back of her neck. Somewhere out there, unseen, a rifle was searching for her. She wiped snow from her scope, pressed her cheek to the stock, and scanned the canyon again. The convoy below was still locked in chaos, bullets hammering armor, RPG trails streaking white through the blizzard, men scrambling behind the hulks of their vehicles. Her shots had bought them minutes, but minutes were all she could ever give. Her real fight was up here. The Russians weren't careless. They'd sent professionals. She recognized the method in the way the hostile fire adapted, not random, not desperate. Calculated adjustments. Someone was directing, someone with her same skill set. And then she heard it. The faintest compression of snow behind her, a sound so slight most ears would dismiss it as wind, but not hers. Her pulse slowed. The predator had arrived. She didn't turn immediately. Instead, she let silence stretch, scanning peripheral movement with the corner of her eye. The Russians had loosed a counter-sniper. Not just any, the rhythm of approach told her enough. This wasn't an eager young shooter. This was someone patient, someone who had learned to wait as long as she had. "Catherine Morgan," a voice finally called. Perfect English with only a trace of an accent. Calm, almost conversational. "After all these years we meet." Her spine stiffened, but she stayed still, rifle cradled against her. "I studied your shot in Afghanistan," the voice went on. "Extraordinary. Ballistics said it was impossible, but you made it possible." Her lips barely moved. "Who are you?" "My name is Alexei Koskin. Some call me Ghost Wolf. Perhaps you've heard it." The name struck like a round to her gut. She had. The Russian sniper who claimed the longest kill in Chechnya, a phantom whispered about in after-action reports. She had wondered if he was myth. Now he was here. He laughed softly through the storm. "Victor said you would be good, but I have been watching you. You're not just good, Catherine, you're the best." A flicker of snow disturbed 30 meters to her right. She aligned her rifle in a breath, finger feathering the trigger. The TAC-338 roared. The bullet smashed through rock, but Koskin wasn't there. He had already moved. Snowflakes swirled back in her scope, empty. A chuckle drifted on the wind. "Fast, very fast, this will be interesting." Kate's jaw tightened. The duel had begun. Captain Callahan crouched behind a boulder, Ranger team spread around him. The convoy was still trapped, pinned beneath withering fire. Above, the rifle cracks of Morgan's shots thundered intermittently, each one forcing Russians to cover. But Callahan's gut twisted. He knew what those cracks meant. She wasn't firing as often now. She was occupied. He spoke low into comms. "Alpha, Morgan's compromised, counter-snipers on her." Tors grunted. "So she's fighting their best while we fight their army. Perfect." "Keep moving," Callahan ordered. "She buys us time, we buy the convoy time. Everyone's buying seconds, that's how we survive." But inside, he knew seconds weren't enough. Kate slid through the snow, abandoning her signature rifle. The TAC-338 was a beacon now, its roar too distinct. The Russians could track the sound, triangulate her position. She pulled her backup, a compact Remington 700 with a folding stock. Lighter, shorter range, but easier to move with. Her breath fogged the air as she crept low, senses stretched thin across the storm. Koskin wasn't rushing. He was circling, probing, testing. She felt something strange then, a flicker of admiration buried under the fear. He was good. Too good. Maybe the only one she had ever met who could match her patience. The blizzard thickened. The storm closed around them both, shrinking the world to 50 meters of visibility. Two predators in a cage of snow. And then his voice again, closer now. "You should have stayed gone, Morgan. You've lived too long on ghosts. This fight is not yours anymore." She didn't answer, words wasted breath. But his tone shifted, softer, almost regretful. "You killed Nikolai Petrov, my comrade, my friend's brother. Did you know Victor watched him die?" Her stomach clenched. Petrov, the name that had haunted her, so it was true. The ambush wasn't random. None of it was. She shifted, slow and careful, adjusting her position by inches. If she could see him first. "Victor has waited years for this moment," Koskin said. "He will end you, Catherine. I will end you if he does not. But," a pause, "I would rather not." Her trigger finger tightened. A shadow flickered in her scope movement among rocks. 30 meters again. But was it bait? The storm howled, drowning her heartbeat. She whispered into the silence, "Then stop hunting me." His chuckle returned, low, dangerous. "No, we hunt until one of us is gone." At the convoy, the situation deteriorated. The lead Humvee was crippled, flames licking from its hood. The MRAP, the so-called safe haven, was buckling under shaped charges at its side. Ranger Spencer dove behind twisted metal, eyes wide. "They're trying to take the physicist alive. They're not killing, they're breaching." Callahan's stomach sank. Extraction op, not a hit, they're here for him. The Russians weren't just trying to destroy. They wanted the man inside. Dr. Baronov, a nuclear mind with secrets too dangerous to fall into enemy hands. And above it all, he knew, Morgan was fighting her duel in the snow. If she lost, if Ghost Wolf silenced her, they would all be buried here. Kate's muscles trembled with cold, but her mind was steel. She crawled along the ridge, snow soaking her uniform. The Remington pressed against her shoulder, its scope ghosted with frost. Then she saw him. Alexei Koskin crouched against a rock outcropping, rifle angled toward the convoy. Patient, perfect form, watching for her but focused on his kill zone. She leveled her sights, finger on the trigger. But something in her chest faltered. This man wasn't like the others she had killed. She could feel it in his pauses, in his words. He was here not only as her enemy, but as a pawn. His movements carried weight, the kind of weight men bore when others' lives were tied to theirs. She whispered more to herself than him, "Who's holding you, Alexei?" He turned his head as if he'd heard, and in that moment, for a heartbeat, their eyes met through snowfall. Not predator to prey, but mirror to mirror. And she knew this fight wasn't just hers anymore. How do you decide, in the space of a breath, whether to kill a man who was born to kill you? Kate Morgan had faced thousands of enemies in her life. Most she'd reduced to silhouettes, targets, equations of wind and distance. But Alexei Koskin wasn't just another figure in her crosshairs. He was the reflection she'd been avoiding for years, another ghost molded by the same brutal craft, carrying the same scars, only speaking in Russian instead of English. And right now, he was 10 seconds from pulling the trigger on her Rangers. She steadied the Remington's crosshairs over the faint shape of his head. Her finger pressed, tension sharp against the trigger wall, but something made her pause. It wasn't mercy. She'd left mercy behind long ago. It was something colder, recognition. The way he shifted his weight before firing, the way he breathed through the storm, the patience in his aim. He was her. And she wasn't ready to erase herself from the earth just yet. Her whisper cut the storm. "Who owns you, Alexei?" For a moment, no answer. Then through the snow his voice carried back quiet, raw, "Victor, and through him, my daughter." Kate's chest tightened. She didn't lower her weapon, but the words struck deep. "What does Petrov hold over you?" "My Natasha," he said. 16, Alone since her mother died. Victor pays for her school, for her safety. If I fail him, she disappears. There it was, the chain around his neck. The reason his steps carried hesitation. She could hear it in his tone, the edge of a man trapped, not loyal. She adjusted her scope, eyes narrowing. So you'll die here, leaving her in his grip anyway. That's your plan. Koskin shifted slightly, lowering his rifle a fraction. What choice do I have? You Americans, you don't protect the children of your enemies. You bury them. Kate's jaw clenched. He wasn't wrong, not about the system she'd been cast out of, but she wasn't that system anymore. Listen to me, she said, voice steady, clipped. I have a man, Bill Harrison, old CIA. He's pulled families out of Moscow before. You help me stop Petrov, and within 48 hours your daughter is free. Silence, long enough that she thought maybe he'd melted back into the storm. Then his reply, low and careful. Do not lie to me, Catherine. My rifle is faster than yours at this distance. Then test me, she whispered. The wind screamed between them, carrying snow like shrapnel. Both still in the scope of the other, both hearts steady. And for the first time in years, Kate Morgan gambled with something more dangerous than her life. She gambled with trust. Down in the canyon, the convoy was crumbling. The lead Humvee was gutted, its crew trapped inside by enemy fire. The MRAP, the so-called fortress on wheels, shook under the pounding of thermite charges. Sparks danced along its armor, seams like fireflies in the storm. Inside, the Russian defector Baronov bled through Chen's desperate hands. Captain Callahan pressed against a jagged rock wall, eyes darting between his men. Status. Tor's, blood smeared down his face, barked, Ammunition 30%, sir. Gustav's got 2 rounds left. We're burning fast. Reinforcements. Mitchell's voice cracked through the comms, grim. 40 minutes minimum. Weather's grounded everything else. We're on our own. The canyon shook as another shaped charge detonated against the MRAP's flank. The blast lit up the snowfall like lightning. Baronov groaned inside, and Chen cursed, pressing harder on his wound. Callahan felt the clock closing. 10 minutes, maybe less, before the Russians cut through. And then his radio hissed, a voice, female, calm under fire. Callahan, Morgan, I've got an asset with me, don't fire on approach. He frowned, asset. Alexei Koskin, Russian sniper, he's with me. The name cracked through his team like a shockwave. Tor spat. Koskin, that bastard's been hunting us for years. Callahan's instincts screamed distrust, but he also knew Morgan hadn't wasted a single word since she reappeared. She wouldn't risk this if it wasn't real. You vouch for him, Callahan demanded. A pause, then flat, decisive. I do. Callahan glanced at his men. Skepticism burned in their eyes, but so did exhaustion. They were running out of options. He keyed the mic. Approach careful. Any hostile movement, we drop him. Minutes later, 2 figures emerged through the storm, shapes materializing like ghosts. Morgan in her white thermal suit, rifle slung, her face hard as the snow cut around her. Behind her, Alexei Koskin, his weapon held low, movements precise but non-threatening. The Rangers' rifles trained on him instantly. Williams muttered, one twitch and he's gone. Kate stepped in front, her voice sharp, he's with me. Callahan stared at Koskin, assessing every line of his posture. Predator through and through, but his eyes, they weren't the eyes of zealotry. They were the eyes of a man chained. Why shouldn't I put a bullet in you right now? Callahan asked coldly. Koskin didn't flinch. Because Victor has positioned 3 breach teams with thermite. 90 seconds from now, your MRAP will be ash. Because he has mortar coordinates locked on your bridge fallback. And because if I wanted you dead, Captain, you'd already be a ghost. The detail, the precision, it was undeniable. Callahan finally gave a short nod. Temporary trust. 1 step out of line, you're done. Koskin inclined his head once, as if the deal were sealed. Kate exhaled slowly. For the first time since her first shot, she felt something shift. Not safety, never safety, but possibility. Still, the storm of enemies pressed in. Russian operators moved with professional rhythm, converging on the Rangers' position. Their comms crackled with orders in clipped Russian, signals bouncing as Petrov orchestrated the kill box from somewhere unseen. Koskin spread a tactical map across a crate, his gloved finger tracing positions. They'll hit in 3 waves. 2 4-man teams from the north, 3 from the east, heavy weapons from the south ridge. Mortar suppression first, then breach. Callahan studied it grimly. They're tightening the noose. Kate's eyes narrowed. Victor's here, I can feel it. He's not leaving this to chance. Koskin met her gaze across the flickering lamplight. He has waited 17 years for you, Catherine. He watched his brother fall through your scope. He built this entire operation to bring you into the open. Her stomach clenched. It was what she feared. Alpha hadn't been a mistake. None of it was. It had all been Viktor Petrov's hand, moving her like a pawn until she was cast out, erased. And now he was here to finish it. She felt Callahan's eyes on her. He didn't need to ask the question. She spoke it anyway, voice low. This isn't just a convoy op anymore. This is a vendetta, and I'm the bait. For a long moment, the storm howled around them all, snow plastering the stone bridge. The Rangers, the defector, the Russian sniper who had become their uneasy ally, all bound together by a trap 17 years in the making. Kate Morgan closed her eyes briefly, steadying her breath. She had always been ready to die in the line of duty, but this was different. This wasn't duty. This was justice. And maybe, finally, redemption. As the first Russian assault team broke from the eastern tree line, Callahan gave the order. All positions engage. Gunfire cracked through the storm, Rangers and Russians colliding in a storm of snow, fire, and blood. And above it all, Kate's rifle spoke again. How long could flesh and bone stand against steel and fire? The question wasn't theoretical anymore. It was screaming in Kate Morgan's ears, echoing off stone, carved in blood. The first Russian wave had hit like a hammer. 4 men in white camouflage, trained, precise, firing in bursts that cut through snow like sparks in darkness. The Rangers answered in kind, their rifles cracking, the canyon flashing with muzzle fire. The air filled with the acrid stench of propellant, mixed with the raw copper of spilled blood. Kate's rifle spoke again, her scope locked on a silhouette weaving between rocks. One breath, one trigger, and the man dropped, body folding silently into the storm. She slid, adjusted, found another target. Her world had narrowed to angles and motion, her mind sharpening to the ruthless clarity that came only when death pressed close. Koskin crouched 2 meters away, his own rifle cracking in counterpoint to hers. Their shots overlapped, synchronized not by plan but by instinct, 2 predators forced to hunt the same prey. The rhythm felt uncanny. For years, they had hunted opposite sides of the same war. Now in this blizzard, they were brothers and enemies both. Callahan barked into comms. South Ridge suppressing fire, Tor's flank left, Williams, you cover Chen. The Rangers moved with the economy of the experienced, but even experience bent under weight. The Russian assault pressed harder, bodies flowing from the storm, more numerous than expected. Every Ranger hit 1 target, maybe 2, but 3 more filled the gaps. And above it all, Kate knew Viktor Petrov was watching. Half a mile away, Viktor stood beneath the fractured canopy of an ancient pine, binoculars pressed to his eyes. His breath ghosted in the cold, but his pulse was steady. He had waited too long for this to rush. The lens revealed everything he craved. The Rangers pinned on the bridge. The convoy locked in chaos, his men pressing forward in perfect waves, and there, the ridge. Sorry. Catherine Morgan. Even through snow and distance, he recognized her form, the sharp angles of her stance, the cold precision of her shots. He had memorized those movements, replayed the footage of his brother's death until the tape warped. And now here she was, in flesh in his sights. A cruel smile tugged his lips. "Do you see, Nikolai? She is not a ghost, she bleeds." Beside him, his age shifted uneasily. "Sir, our losses are heavier than expected." Victor lowered the binoculars, eyes narrowing. "Losses are fuel. Do you know what matters? That she feels them, that she drowns in the weight of every body that falls because of her. That is the punishment." He turned back to the sightline. Her rifle flashed again, cutting another of his men down. His smile widened. "Soon," he whispered, "she will break." On the bridge, Chen screamed as shrapnel tore through his shoulder, dragging him back from the MRAP's hatch. Callahan grabbed him, shoved him against the steel. "Stay alive, medic. You're the only one keeping Baronov breathing." "Trying, sir," Chen hissed, blood soaking his sleeve as he pressed trembling hands against the Russian defector's chest wound. The MRAP shook again as a thermite charge detonated against its flank, heat searing through steel, warping metal into molten streaks. Inside, Baronov gasped, eyes wide with terror. "They want me alive." "We noticed," Tors yelled, firing another controlled burst before ducking back. Kate shifted, sighting an enemy crawling toward the bridge under cover of snow. Her shot punched clean through his skull. She moved again, her breath even. Calm under fire but deep in her chest, a quiet drumbeat of unease grew louder. This wasn't normal. The waves weren't random, they were staged. Victor wasn't just attacking, he was shaping the battlefield. And she knew why. He wanted her exhausted, wanted her pressed against the edge until her hands shook, until she made the one mistake he had waited 17 years for. Her jaw set, "Not tonight, Petrov." Koskin shifted beside her, firing another round that shattered an enemy's kneecap. He muttered low, almost conversational, even as death tore around them. "This is madness. He throws lives like dice." Kate didn't look at him. He always did. "You know him." Her silence was answer enough. Koskin glanced sidelong at her, snow streaking his beard. "Then you know he will not stop." She pulled her bolt, chambered again, eyes hard. "Neither will I." The second Russian wave hit harder than the first. Grenades arced through the storm, detonating against stone, concussions shaking the bridge. Williams cried out as shrapnel caught his thigh, blood spraying into snow. Tors dragged him back, teeth bared against the fire pouring down. Callahan's voice cut through chaos. "Hold the line. If they break this bridge, Baronov is gone." Kate's scope found a Russian advancing with a satchel charge. She exhaled, fired, tore through his chest. But two more sprinted behind him, dragging the charge forward. Koskin's rifle barked, one fell. Kate pivoted, clipped the other. The charge dropped meters from the bridge, detonating in a bloom that rattled every bone. The bridge held barely, cracks spidered across its stone spine. Kate's pulse didn't spike, but something inside her cracked with it. The enemy's relentlessness wasn't about victory. It was about theater. Victor wanted her to feel inevitability. She remembered Alpha, the ambush, the moment she pulled the trigger on the man with the IED. The world hadn't seen his hidden detonator. They had only seen his blood. She remembered the silence afterward, the accusations, the erasure. And now here, Petrov was replaying the same scene, only bigger. More bodies, more witnesses, her name painted in fire again. Her throat tightened. For years she had told herself she didn't care what the world thought. But here now, she realized the truth. It wasn't about the world. It was about herself. She couldn't bear to live erased. Not again. The third wave came like a tidal surge. Dozens of Russians, rifles blazing, storming from every angle. RPG trails streaked overhead, explosions rocking the bridge. The Rangers dug in, answering with everything they had left. Callahan roared above the fire. "This is it, hold or die." Tors cursed as his M4 jammed, pulling a pistol, firing point blank. Williams bled heavily but kept shooting from prone, teeth gritted against the pain. Chen, pale with blood loss, still pressed trembling hands to Baronov's wound. "Stay alive, damn it! Stay alive!" Kate dropped 3 more in seconds, her shots precise, relentless. But her rifle was overheating, barrel glowing faintly through the snow. Koskin fired alongside her, his voice ragged. "We can't hold this, Catherine. We'll drown in them." Her response was flat, cold. "Then we drown standing." And then through the storm, a new sound. A slow clap. Viktor Petrov walked onto the bridge. Snow swirled around him like a crown, his heavy coat unmarked by battle, his stride unhurried. He walked through falling bullets as though immune, flanked by 2 of his elite guard. The Russians pulled back instinctively, parting like a tide around him. Kate's scope locked on his head, one squeeze and it would end. But her finger froze. Because Viktor wasn't carrying a rifle, he carried only a radio and his smile. "Catherine," he called, his voice rolling across the chaos. 17 years and finally here you are." The battle stilled, gunfire slowed then stopped, snow fell heavy in silence. Every eye turned to her. Viktor spread his arms. "You took my brother, my blood, and tonight I will take you." Kate's chest rose and fell, her rifle trembling just slightly against her shoulder. This was what she had feared. This was what she had waited for. And now she had no choice but to face it. What happens when the war isn't in the gunfire, but in the silence between 2 people who refuse to blink? Kate Morgan stood at the ridge end of the bridge, her rifle aimed at Viktor Petrov. For a sniper, the decision should have been simple. One squeeze and his blood would paint the snow. But it wasn't simple. Not now. Viktor didn't move. He didn't even flinch. Snow gathered on the shoulders of his heavy coat, melting slowly against the warmth of a body that seemed carved from steel. He looked at her not as a soldier looks at an enemy, but as a man looks at the mirror he has chased his whole life. 17 years, he called, his Russian accent curling through the storm. "Do you know how many nights I have replayed my brother's death, Catherine?" Kate's jaw clenched. She didn't lower her rifle. "Your brother carried an IED. He would have killed dozens of my men." Viktor's smile spread, cruel, knowing. "Ah, the justification. I have heard it 1,000 times in your files, in your reports. But tell me, did the world care about his detonator? Did they care about the trigger hidden under his shirt?" The words cut deep. She felt the old scar throb, the tribunal that erased her, the silence that followed. "No," Viktor said softly, stepping forward. "They did not, and neither did you." Kate's finger tightened on the trigger, the barrel aimed steady at the center of his skull. Every instinct screamed to fire, to end this. But Viktor's calm unsettled her. He wasn't afraid. He wanted her to pull that trigger. "Why are you here, Viktor?" she asked finally, her voice a low growl. His eyes gleamed like black glass. "Because your life has been mine since the day you took Nikolai's. You killed a brother. I will kill your name, your legacy. And when the world sees you here, murdering Russians in the snow, they will not call you soldier. They will call you butcher." The words echoed like thunder. Her heart didn't race, it slowed, every beat deliberate. This wasn't about her death. This was about her erasure again. His war was not fought with bullets. It was fought with memory. "You built this whole ambush," she whispered, "just to drag me into the open." Viktor tilted his head slightly, the faintest grin curling his lips. "Yes." Around them, silence hung heavy. The Rangers held their rifles tense but didn't fire. Koskin crouched nearby, his scope drifting between Viktor's guards and Viktor himself, sweat freezing on his temple. Callahan's voice broke the quiet. "Morgan, take the shot." But Kate didn't. Not yet. Something told her that killing Viktor now wouldn't end this. It would just feed the shadow he wanted her to wear. Viktor took another step. "You have killed hundreds, Catherine, ghosts with no names. My brother had a name, and you erased him. Do you feel the difference?" Her throat tightened, but her reply was sharp. Every man I put down would have killed mine. That's the difference. I sleep with their names, do you? For the first time, Victor's smile faltered, a flicker, small but there. Kate pressed. You think you carry grief. You carry obsession. There's a difference. You turned your brother's death into your religion. Victor's eyes narrowed and his voice cracked like glass. And you turned your rifle into God. The storm howled between them. Koskin shifted suddenly, speaking fast in Russian. Victor, enough. You are burning men like tinder. Stop this madness. Victor turned his gaze, cold and sharp. Silence, Alexei. Do not forget who feeds your daughter. The air thickened. Kate saw Koskin's hand tremble on his rifle, his eyes caught between loyalty and survival. She cut in, her voice steady, aimed at him. He doesn't feed her, Koskin. He owns her. There's a difference. Don't let him chain her to this grave he's digging. Koskin's jaw worked. His breath came sharp. Victor sneered. Do not listen to her lies, Alexei. She will use you, just as America uses all its pawns. Kate took a step closer, lowering her scope just enough to show she wasn't aiming at Koskin. Her words came quiet but deadly precise. If you think I'm lying, then shoot me now. End it. But if you believe your daughter deserves more than being a bargaining chip for this man's grief, then stand with me. Koskin's breath shuddered in the cold. His rifle lowered a fraction. Victor's expression soured, a storm brewing behind his eyes. Alex, his voice dropped to a hiss. Do not betray me. And for the first time since the ambush began, Kate saw fear in Viktor Petrov's face. The Rangers shifted uneasily, weapons still trained, fingers white-knuckled against their triggers. Callahan whispered to Tors, if this goes sideways, we cut them all down. Tors muttered back, I don't even know what side we're on anymore. Kate heard them, she understood. This wasn't just about survival. This was about choosing which shadow to stand in. Victor sensed it too. He spread his arms wide, his voice booming across the bridge. You think you can break me, Catherine? Kill me and I become a martyr. Spare me and I become your nightmare. Either way, you lose. Her rifle steadied again, pointed squarely at his forehead. For a moment she let silence answer. Then she spoke, calm, deliberate. You're wrong. Victor's eyes narrowed. I don't lose either way, because you've already told me the truth. Confusion flickered across his face. You didn't come here for the convoy, she continued. You didn't come for Baronov, you came for me. Every man who's died here, you burned them for your obsession. And when this is over, that obsession will die with you. Not as a martyr, not as a nightmare, as a man who couldn't let go of a ghost. Her words sliced sharper than her bullets ever could. She saw it land, the tightening of his jaw, the flicker in his eyes. For the first time, Viktor Petrov looked smaller. She exhaled. Her finger tightened. The storm exploded. Gunfire ripped across the bridge as Petrov's guards opened fire, breaking the standoff. Rangers dropped to cover, returning fire in a blaze of muzzle flashes. Koskin cursed in Russian, spinning his rifle and dropping one of the guards in a single shot. Victor lunged back, dragging his radio to his lips. All units, kill them all, burn the bridge. Kate fired, her shot missing him by inches as he ducked behind the MRAP. Bullets screamed overhead, snow erupting into white clouds. The silence was gone, the storm of steel returned. But one thing had shifted. Victor was no longer untouchable. Kate dropped into cover, chambering another round, her breath ragged now. She glanced at Koskin. He met her eyes. For the first time, no words were needed. They were no longer predator and prey. They were allies. And Viktor Petrov, the man who had chased her shadow for 17 years, had just lost control of his board. How long can stone hold the weight of fire? How long before it shatters beneath those who refuse to yield? Kate Morgan pressed her cheek to the rifle, her body buried in the cold bite of snow, as the world around her began to break. Petrov's guards had unleashed hell. Bullets chewed through stone, sparks danced off steel, and the bridge groaned under the weight of explosions. The second thermite charge had already gutted a chunk of the eastern arch. Another strike and the bridge would not just crack, it would fall. "South wall's buckling," Torres shouted, his voice raw against the storm. "If that span gives, we're all going down with it." Callahan's reply was ragged, half drowned by gunfire. "Then we hold till we can't." The Rangers dug in, bloodied but unbroken. Williams, his thigh soaked in red, fired from prone, teeth clenched against pain. Chen, pale and trembling, still fought to keep Baronov alive, his hands pressed firm to the wound. Callahan barked orders between bursts, his face smeared with grit and blood but his voice unshaken. And through it all, Kate's rifle cracked, each shot carving space against the tide. But it was no longer just survival, it was destiny colliding head-on. Because Viktor Petrov was here. And Viktor Petrov would not stop until one of them lay dead beneath the snow. Koskin dropped beside her, his breath fogging in bursts, his rifle barrel glowing faint from overuse. He spat into the snow, muttering, "We can't hold much longer. The bridge won't survive another blast." Kate didn't take her eyes from her scope. "Then we don't let them set another charge." Koskin glanced at her, something flickering in his expression, half respect, half fear. "You sound like him, like Viktor, refusing to let go even when the stone crumbles beneath your feet." She met his gaze hard. "Difference is I fight to keep people alive. He fights to bury them." Koskin gave a short nod, and for the first time there was no divide between them. Viktor crouched behind the gutted MRAP, his radio clutched tight, fury etched across his face. He screamed orders in Russian, spittle freezing on his lips. His men obeyed, pressing forward in suicidal waves, not out of loyalty but out of fear. Through the crack of rifles and thunder of grenades, he stole glances at her, always at her. Catherine Morgan, the ghost that haunted his nights, the shadow he could never outrun. And even now, with everything collapsing, he smiled. "Do you feel it, Catherine?" he bellowed across the chaos. "This bridge is your life, cracked, crumbling, falling under the weight of your sins." His voice carried through the storm, and though it was madness, it had weight. The Rangers faltered at the words, if only for a heartbeat. Kate's jaw tightened. She raised her rifle, but Petrov ducked back again, using his men like armor, always just out of reach. He wanted her to chase, wanted her to step onto the brittle spine of the bridge and fight him in the open. And part of her wanted to. Another blast tore the night. The western support shuddered, stone splintering, cracks running like veins through the span. Koskin swore, "One more charge and we're gone." Kate's mind raced. Retreat was impossible, the convoy trapped, the defector wounded. Reinforcements were too far, the storm grounding every bird. There was only one path left. She turned to Koskin, "Cover me." His eyes widened, "You'll be killed." Her voice was steady, "Not if I end it first." Before he could argue, she broke cover, sprinting across the fractured bridge. Bullets snapped past her, biting into stone. She slid behind the gutted MRAP, close enough now to hear Viktor's breathing. The world narrowed to 2 heartbeats, hers and his. Viktor's guards spun toward her. Kate dropped low, firing twice. 2 bodies crumpled, their rifles clattering against stone. She rolled, slammed into cover, chambered again. Viktor stepped into view, pistol raised, his smile wide. At last. She leveled her rifle at his chest, his pistol at her head. Time slowed. Snow swirled between them, flakes catching in the firelight like ash. The storm muted, the gunfire distant. It was just them now. "You killed my brother," Viktor hissed. Kate's voice was cold. "Your brother chose his war, I chose mine." "You erased him. You erased yourself chasing me." They circled, weapons locked, each breath a trigger pull from ending everything. Then Viktor laughed, sharp, broken. "Do you know why I never let go, Catherine? Because when you pulled that trigger, you gave me purpose. Without you, I am nothing. So thank you. Thank you for being my war." Her chest tightened, not with fear but with sorrow. This was the truth of obsession. Not love, not loyalty, not even vengeance. Just a hollow man feeding himself on ghosts. And she whispered it low, final. "I won't be your purpose anymore." Her rifle cracked. Victor staggered back, shock flashing across his face. He looked down at the hole blooming red in his chest, then back at her. His smile lingered, weak but still there. "Then I die with him." He collapsed, snow swallowing his body. The bridge screamed. The final charge detonated somewhere below, and stone gave way. Cracks spidered into chasms, rock tearing apart beneath their boots. "Bridge is going," Callahan roared. "Fall back now." The Rangers scrambled, dragging Baronov, bodies slipping on ice. William screamed as the ground split beneath him, Tors yanking him back just before the span collapsed. Kate staggered, nearly falling as the stone crumbled under her. Koskin's hand shot out, gripping her wrist, hauling her up. For one surreal second their eyes locked, a predator saving predator. Then they ran. Behind them the bridge split in two, the canyon devouring its remains in a thunder of stone and fire. The storm roared, swallowing the last echoes of Viktor Petrov's war. On the ridge the Rangers regrouped, breath ragged, faces ghost-white in the snow. Baronov groaned but lived, Chen pressing gauze into his wound. Callahan counted his men, the losses, the wounded. They had survived, but barely. And in the distance, smoke rose from the shattered bridge, curling into the storm like a final prayer. Kate dropped to her knees, her rifle slipping from her hands. For the first time since Checkpoint Alpha, she allowed herself to breathe, really breathe. It was over. Viktor Petrov was gone. And so was the bridge he had chosen as her grave. Koskin crouched beside her, his breath uneven. "You've ended him, but he will live in memory, in every man who followed him, in every daughter he left." Kate looked at him, her voice heavy but certain. "Then we make sure his memory dies differently than he wanted, not as a martyr, not as a nightmare, as a man who burned his own soldiers for revenge." Koskin studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "And my daughter." She met his gaze steady. "I keep my word." For the first time the faintest crack softened his hardened features, a hint of relief, a sliver of hope. The storm eased, snow falling softer now, as though the mountain itself had exhaled. The Rangers stood battered, broken, but alive. Callahan looked at Kate, his eyes narrowing with a mix of suspicion and respect. "Never thought I'd say this, Morgan, but thank you." She didn't reply. Words weren't her weapon. Her silence was. And tonight, silence had spoken louder than any bullet. What remains after the fire dies? After the echoes fade, after the bridge has fallen, what is left for the living to carry? Kate Morgan knew the answer: silence. The storm had passed. The Rangers huddled in the skeletal remains of the convoy, their breath white against the night, their faces hollowed by exhaustion. Snow muffled everything, soft and merciless, as if nature itself was burying the battle before the blood had cooled. The wounded were patched. The dead counted. Baronov clung to life, stabilized enough for the medevac that would come, hours late, but still coming. Callahan's men moved in tired rhythm, their eyes carrying the weight of survivors who knew tomorrow's war would come just as mercilessly. And apart from them, sitting against a rock blackened by fire, Kate watched the smoke drift. Her rifle lay across her knees, but for the first time in years it felt lighter. Not because its weight had changed, but because the weight inside her had shifted. Viktor Petrov was gone. The man who had chased her shadow, who had shaped her fall, who had turned her into his obsession, silenced. And yet there was no triumph, no victory cry, only quiet. Because men like Viktor didn't truly vanish. They lingered in the memories of those they scarred. She had lived with ghosts long enough to know. Koskin crouched a few meters away, sharpening his knife absent-mindedly, his breath shallow. He hadn't spoken much since the bridge collapsed. When his eyes drifted to her, they carried a question he hadn't yet asked aloud. Finally, he broke the silence. "My daughter, you swore to help her." Kate met his gaze. Her voice was steady, though her chest ached with the promise. "I don't break my word." He studied her, searching for the lie. But there was none. After a long beat, he nodded once, almost imperceptibly, as though he were allowing himself, for the first time in years, to believe in something other than fear. "Then," he said quietly, "perhaps the ghosts of tonight won't all be mine." She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Captain Callahan walked over, his steps heavy, his face carved in lines of exhaustion. He stopped before her, rifle slung, arms crossed. "I'll be honest," he said flatly. "When you broke radio silence and said your name, I thought it was a trick. I thought you were the monster they said you were." Kate raised an eyebrow, not defensive, not curious, just waiting. "But then," Callahan went on, "I watched you stand between us and a man who would have burned us all. You didn't do it for orders. You didn't do it for politics. You did it because you couldn't not." His jaw worked. He exhaled, a plume of white fog. "Whatever else they say about you, Morgan, tonight you saved us." Kate let the words hang in the air. Praise had never been her currency, not anymore. Finally, she said softly, "I didn't save you. We saved each other." Callahan studied her, then gave a slow nod, and for the first time his hand extended. She shook it. It wasn't absolution, but it was acknowledgement, and that was enough. Hours later, dawn bled across the mountains, soft light breaking through thinning clouds. The storm had passed, the snow now glittering like glass shards across the battlefield. The Rangers prepared for evacuation, rigging stretchers, setting comms beacons. Helicopters would come when the sky cleared. Kate stood apart as always on the ridge. She looked down at the shattered bridge, its broken spine swallowed by the canyon. Stone that had stood for centuries, undone in one night of fire. She thought of Victor's words, "This bridge is your life." And maybe in a way he had been right, cracked, shaken, nearly collapsed under the weight of ghosts. But not gone. Because she was still here. Her silence had spoken when politics tried to erase her. Her rifle had spoken when men doubted her. And when Victor tried to define her, she had answered not with his obsession, but with her refusal to let it consume her. She was not his purpose. She was her own. Koskin approached quietly, his breath misting in the dawn. He stood beside her, silent for a long moment. Finally he asked, "What happens to you now?" Kate's lips curved faintly, almost a smile. "I disappear again." He frowned into silence. She looked at the horizon, the sun breaking, light chasing the storm's shadow. "Into peace, or something close enough." Koskin nodded slowly. His eyes followed hers toward the light. "Perhaps that is all any of us should want." She turned to him. "No, you want more. You want your daughter free. You'll fight for that. And when she's safe, maybe then you'll find your silence." For a moment the hardened sniper's mask slipped. Beneath it, she saw the father. The man who had killed for survival, who had bled for a child's chance at a life unchained. His voice cracked when he said, "If she is free, then maybe I can stop." Kate placed a hand briefly on his shoulder, a gesture as rare for her as mercy. "Then let's make sure she is." When the helicopters came, the Rangers lifted off in battered formation, carrying Baronov and their wounded. Callahan offered her a seat, but she shook her head. "This isn't my war anymore." He didn't argue. He just gave her a final nod, one soldier to another. The rotors whipped snow into storms as the birds lifted, engines fatting into the mountains. And then, once again, silence. Kate stood on the ridge long after the sky had emptied, alone, yet not. Her ghosts were still with her, they always would be, but tonight something had shifted. For years she had lived erased, her name buried in sealed files, her worth stolen by men who never saw what she gave. Tonight she had written her name in snow and fire again, not for the world, not for medals or headlines, but for herself. Because sometimes dignity doesn't shout, it doesn't beg. It simply acts. She turned back toward the cabin she had left, her rifle slung, her boots breaking new tracks into the snow. Each step was heavy, but each step was hers. And for the first time in a long time, Catherine Morgan did not feel erased. She felt real. And sometimes, for a soldier, that was the closest thing to redemption.